Good morning, everyone. It's the 25th of July and 7:30 in Colorado, 8:30 in Skiatook, Oklahoma, and other locations in the Central Time Zone. It is good to see everybody, and it's good to be here. We'll let everybody get connected. We'll get settled in. This is Dream Big Today, morning Bible study, and we'll see what we've got in store today. It's a good one. Every day is a good one, but it's a good one today. So let's see what we have set up. Remember, put in your comments into chat. Put in your prayer requests. Let me get a sip of coffee and get woke up here. No, I don't have Elizabeth's favorite mug today. I'm not even sure where it's at right now, but. So our theme today, as we go through a lot of things, we're going to talk a little bit about moderation and how it fits in our lives in a lot of ways. And as we start looking today, it's going to be 2 Chronicles 14 through 16. So 14, 15, and 16, 3 chapters. And to summarize a little bit, we're in yet another transition of kings. And we have a transition from one king to another, and now King Asa has become the next king of Israel. And in this case, I always like reading this when it starts off very positively. So 2 Chronicles 14, verse 2, Asa did what was pleasing and good in the sight of the Lord his God. It's like I always have a sense of relief when I read that entry to a transition to a new king. It's like, okay, finally we got another good one. And it seems like back and forth in the Old Testament, it's that pendulum swinging, right, between a poor king and a good king. But I always enjoy reading about the good ones and at least trying to learn from their decision making and how they got to where they got to. Too often it's the other way around. And with a new king coming into reign, what do we find? The same old, let's clean house, right? The pendulum swings, and so here we go. We're going to tear down pagan shrines, sacred pillars, all the garbage that needs to be cleaned out. It's almost like that, big garbage sale to get rid of the junk and clean house, and then we'll start over. And it might last for a period of time, but just like our garages, they tend to fill back up, right, with garbage. But there's a reward for this. He's following the Lord, and he's dedicating the kingdom back to God. And so at the end of verse 5, we hear, so King Asa's kingdom enjoyed a period of peace. He's getting the reward. He's getting the provisioning from God because of his preparation of the kingdom and setting them in the right direction, right? But even though he's at peace and he's got this period of peace and he could truly rest, he's smart not to just sit by idly. He's smart to engage, right? And so in verse 7, Asa told the people of Judah, let us build towns and fortify them with walls, towers, gates, and bars. The land is still ours because we sought the Lord our God, and he has given us peace on every side. So they went ahead with their projects and brought them to completion. So even though Asa is reaping this provisioning of peace, he stepped into a state of preparation, a new state of preparation for what could come, what might be. He's preparing for what could potentially be the worst that could happen, right? So as Christians, how often do we want to simplify our lives and say, well, God's got this. So I don't need to do anything. God will work it out. It's all in God's hands, right? And too often I think we use that as an excuse to mean, well, that means we don't need to plan. We don't need to prepare. But what we find is when we really truly do prepare, God's order comes upon it, and that's when the provisioning is twofold or fourfold or tenfold, right? It's hard for God to amplify zero or nothing. If we apply nothing, we're going to reap nothing. And I think that's something we got to keep in balance, in moderation again. Although King Asa could rest, he would do it in moderation. He rested in moderation while preparing for what could be. Asa built an army of 300,000 warriors from the tribe of Judah and another 280,000 from the tribe of Benjamin. Pretty good-sized army. And remember, back in Judges, the tribe of Benjamin had been reduced down to 600 men. So that's pretty small. But during the time of peace, why build an army? Again, he was prudent to prepare for a potential adversary. He didn't have one that he knew about, or it doesn't speak that way, but he just knew that the potential was always there. And so he wanted to be thinking ahead, preparing for that future. And lo and behold, we get to verse 9. Once an Ethiopian named Zerah attacked Judah with an army of 1 million men and 300 chariots. They advanced to the town of Mareshah, so Asa deployed his armies for battle in the valley north of Mareshah. Then Asa cried out to the Lord his God, O Lord, no one but you can help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord our God, for we trust in you alone. It is your name that we have come against this vast horde. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let mere men prevail against you. Now, as we look at that, he's calling upon God, but to me it doesn't sound like he's in despair. It's like he's doing this from a position of confidence. And he's not saying, oh Lord, we're about to be overrun, save us, we're all about to die. It's like, no, it's we trust in you alone, Lord. We stand against this vast horde. And so he's admitting that, it doesn't look great in the numbers, but we're standing here, and we know that you won't let mere men prevail against you. He's not talking about against us, the Israelites, he's saying against you. This displays great faith on Asa's part. He recognized that God's power was so much greater than his own, and with God on his side, no amount of force could be successful against him. So he really understood dedicating the country to God and following God's wisdom was the way to protect the country. So we get to verse 12, 2 Chronicles 14:12. So the Lord defeated the Ethiopians in the presence of Asa and the army of Judah, and the enemy fled. Interesting the way they word that. But the Lord defeated the Ethiopians in the presence of Asa. But it's not like Asa and his army did nothing. They had to fight. God did it through Asa's army. God did it through the people, the men of confidence, right, standing against this horde. So the preparation paid off. Again, God's order came upon that preparation, and the provisioning this time was winning the war, winning the battle. But I think there's even more than that. So we get to verse 13, and it ends with, they were destroyed by the Lord and his army. So here it shows that the army, did this. And the army of Judah carried off a vast amount of plunder. So there was this reward or this benefit of, the Ethiopians are coming to attack, but they bring all these resources because they have to support their 1 million-man army. And in that, guess what? When they get defeated, they leave all that behind. And there's other areas that obviously Asa and them conquered, but they're able to reap and harvest that plunder, that provisioning, because of their preparation and staying with God and allowing his order upon it. So as we start Chronicles 15, we see Azariah has a warning for King Asa. Now he's just won this battle. Everything's looks like it's going well. But here we have a man of God coming and providing a word of wisdom or a warning. And it seems a little ironic at first as well, why is that even needed? But God knows King Asa is still a man and is fallible, and it's easy to start thinking and reminiscing about this great battle and how you did it in your power, how your skill is what really won the fight, and kind of forget the part that you really relied on the Lord for that win. In our good times, or after some great success, right? That's when it's really easy. We can tend to forget the Lord's role in it, right? When we're backs against the wall and it seems like everything's crumbling around us, it's easy to cry out to the Lord then and say, hey, Lord, help us. We're feeling just in despair. But when we really find things easy to be successful, that's when it may be harder to turn and thank and remember that the Lord was with us through it all, right? So it's remembering and constantly praising God for the blessings that he bestows upon us. And I always just try to remember it this way, that anything good, everything good in the world and the universe comes from God. So if something good's happening, praise God, because he's playing a part of it, right? Now you may be doing effort toward it, you may be applying toward it, but it's your preparation many times that leads to that. Again, we're cooperating with God. That's what leads to success. So Asa gets this warning, and it's really because God, the Lord, he wants to prevent Asa from that pitfall. He doesn't want Asa to step into that pothole, right, that could bring him down, that human nature. And that warning kind of rejuvenated Asa. And again, he goes on about cleansing the land of pagan idols. And this is his 15th year of reign. So we get to 2 Chronicles 15:9. Then Asa called together all the people of Judah and Benjamin, along with the people of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who had settled among them. For many from Israel had moved to Judah during Asa's reign, when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. When people see that, well, they got a little better over there than we got it here, it can provoke people to want to move and take part in that. But in this case, Asa's marshaling everybody together, and they had a big feast. They sacrificed 700 cattle, 7,000 sheep. That's a pretty big party. But in reality, this was all the tithe from the spoil, from the plunder that they had taken. So then it makes you think about it in a perspective. That's a small portion of a much larger resource that they were able to capture and retain. So even back then, though, we saw that people were willing to uproot, and everybody wants to join a winning team. So you can imagine these different tribes, and all of a sudden, well, this tribe over here, they've got their act together, and they're getting the benefit, the provisioning from God because of the way they're participating. I want to move over there and operate like they operate, and reap that same benefit upon me and my family. It kind of makes sense, and it's no different. In the last 10 years, Colorado here, we've had a huge influx of people coming for a majority of different reasons. But for a number of years, Colorado, and in Colorado Springs specifically, was typically in the top 3 or 4 places in the United States to live. Not so much anymore. It's degrading fast because they're bringing, again, their garbage with them, their pagan idols with them. And it's kind of like, well, you're coming here because you want to enjoy something that's here. Don't destroy what's here in the process. But too often, human nature doesn't think that way. So we get to 2 Chronicles 15, verse 14. They shouted out their oath of loyalty to the Lord with trumpets blaring and ram's horns sounding. All in Judah were happy about this covenant, for they had entered into it with all their heart. Again, they really believed in it. They rejoiced in it. It wasn't, well, we have to because the king said to, right? They earnestly sought after God. They found him, and the Lord gave them rest from their enemies on every side. Again, it's coming back to that standing firm, that confidence. They're standing firm and confident with the Lord, and he's standing by them. But I like that verse that they earnestly sought after God, they found him. Again, when we seek after God, we can find him too. We just have to do it with the right reason. Too often we do it out of despair. We do it when we hit our lowest lows, or when we fail, instead of even seeking him in our successes. Every little success is a time to praise God. And even many times when we deem that something might be a failure, oh, I had a flat tire. Oh my gosh, it's chaos. It's terrible. But in reality, that might be God's provisioning, delaying me from a potential car accident or something. So Lord, just thank you for whatever this is here for. Whatever this has occurred and you allowed it to occur. You didn't cause it, but you allowed it to occur. You may be protecting me, and I praise you for your protection. And that's just a simple way to thank God in everything that we do, everything we encounter, no matter how hard it is or how bad it seems. And at the end of 2 Chronicles 15, we've seen King Asa even deposed his grandmother from her position as queen mother because she was led astray and wasn't following God. And the family ties didn't matter. It's like, no, we're standing confidently. King Asa and his kingdom of Judah had no more war until his 35th year. So he had a huge provisioning of peace. He had a small provision of peace to begin with, but again, because cooperating with God, now he reaps a huge reward of peace for 35 years. That's crazy when you think about it. We're on 2 Chronicles 16, verse 1. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, King Baasha of Israel invaded Judah and fortified Ramah in order to prevent anyone from entering or leaving King Asa's territory in Judah. So he's trying to barricade them and basically lay siege to the entire kingdom. Asa responded by removing the silver and gold from the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and the royal palace. He sent it to King Ben-Hadad of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. Here we see King Asa, again, he finally failed. He kind of quit following his intuition or what he had originally that led him to God, to seek God and stand with God. And maybe it was too many years of peace. He had it too easy. And he didn't really prepare this time. And so what he winds up doing is more of what I would consider an act of desperation. Well, we'll help build an alliance that will neutralize this potential threat. And maybe he just started getting prideful and thinking that everything he had accomplished in his own power, forgot that, it was God's provisioning to him. And through that, he forgot how and where he received that provisioning. It's just too easy. It's human nature, and it's the fall of man, and we tend to step back into that tar pit time and time again. So always reminding ourselves anything that is good comes from God, and we have to focus on that. So here Asa trades his silver and gold from the temple for an alliance. It does work, but it's not the right way to do what needed to be done. And it wasn't what God really wanted, and it wasn't God's way. God always wants us to prepare so that his order can come upon that, and he can provide us his provisioning. He wants us not sitting with our hands out. He wants us working in cooperation with him so that his provisioning can just flow naturally to us. Now, it's not that we do something and that causes God to do something. His provisioning is always there. It's already there. We have to turn on the spigot. It's like, Andrew Womack will say, you turn on the light switch and the lights come on. The electricity is already there. The provisioning is already there. But we have to turn on the switch, right? We have to activate it. And here we see Asa doesn't do that. And so we're in 2 Chronicles 16:7, and at that time, Hanani the seer came to King Asa and told him, because you have put your trust in the king of Aram instead of the Lord your God, you missed your chance to destroy the army of the king of Aram. You've missed this chance to once again, like with the Ethiopians, you've failed. Even though it looks like you're successful, it wasn't by the right way. So in other words, you've made alliance with the wrong guy. Instead of making an alliance with God, you made an alliance with this foreign king. And maybe it was out of pride. But of course, because of his pride and because of, his little bit of arrogance at this point in time, he doesn't like being corrected. And so he takes the man of God and basically throws him in prison. And so we're already seeing it. And then it talks about that he oppressed many others. So who do you think he oppressed? Those that agreed with him, or those that were trying to correct him, or those that were trying to say, hey, let's remember. And it's like, no, I want to do it my way. Again, that seems very prideful. And it's a shame that he had such a good reign to then to fail at the end of it. It's just a sad ending to what started off so well. But we see that time and time again. That lesson is in the Bible time and time again about don't allow human nature to consume us and lead us astray. So now let's transition. We'll get to the New Testament, and we're looking at Romans again. And Paul teaches so much in Romans, and we're going to look at Romans 9, 1 through 24. But it's interesting when I've always been intrigued by Paul for several reasons. Very educated man. He understood all the scriptures. Very dedicated against Christians and Christianity, and then gets converted, saved, and now it's the pendulum swings, and he's 200% the other way, and he's full on trying to go the other way. But he's smart enough, and it took time for him to prepare to be in this position to where he can articulate things very well because of his background. Now he's in a little bit of a breakdown here in Romans 9 because he's kind of tormented by a little bit of stuff, and some of it I think is understanding the Jews and human nature and the past. And he had previously talked about having such great joy. But here he talks of the heart filled with bitter sorrow and unending grief for the people of Israel. He understands what salvation is and what Jesus has brought, but it's more than just salvation. And he feels like that the Jews are being left behind. And a lot of it, I think he probably feels a little bit of guilt because leaders like him that knew the scriptures that stood out against Christianity are the ones that were building such a strong defense against what was truly right in the coming of Jesus and missing it, right? So he's probably feeling a little bit of self-persecution just because of what he had started with some of this. Here we have the one who persecuted Christians, now seeing the value that Christ brought to the earth, bought and paid for through Jesus' life, and realizing that a vast majority of his people, his Jewish people, the Israelites, were going to miss the boat. So I understand that turmoil is going on in his heart. And I can also see a bit of a correlation. It's a little bit like Noah. And imagine, you're finishing the ark and everybody's laughing at you and nobody's believing in you. And there's people you probably like and have encountered, but people you feel sorry for because you really would like to have them saved. But they're sitting there laughing at you and not believing, and it's starting to rain. And I think that's kind of the same kind of situation that Paul's in right now, that he understands all this. So we get to Romans 9:6. Well then, has God failed to fulfill his promises to Israel? No. For not all who are born into the nation of Israel are truly members of God's people. Being descendants of Abraham doesn't make them truly Abraham's children. For the scriptures say, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted, though Abraham had other children too. This means that Abraham's physical descendants are not necessarily children of God. Only the children of the promise are considered to be Abraham's children. Now there's a couple of things here. Throughout Romans and really through a lot of Paul's teachings and readings, it's interesting that it's almost like he's talking to himself. It's almost like he makes a point, but then he makes a counterpoint. Well, if you're going to neutralize the point, then why bring it up in the first place? But a lot of times he's doing this because he knows that people know he knows the scriptures, but beyond that, others that know the scriptures, he knows what their arguments might be before they ever raise them. And so many times he's doing this to bring up what they might want to, oh yeah, but what about this? And he neutralizes it before they can even bring it up. And that allows him to continue on to the next point to build his lineage of key elements that he wants people to understand. And so he starts off that way, well then, has God failed to fulfill his promises to Israel? No, he answers his own question. It's rhetorical, but he's doing it with a purpose. But it really gets down to this thing that not everybody, just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you're the chosen people. It's the chosen people are those of the Jews that were cooperating correctly, right? Like King Asa. So Paul goes on to explain that Isaac wasn't Abraham's firstborn. And again, back in that era, the firstborn was the one that's going to reap the harvest. He's the one that's going to get the largest provisioning of inheritance, right? And typically, it's not just with Isaac either, though. This passes on to the next generation as well with Jacob. Jacob was Isaac's second-born son. So the Lord is kind of showing us something here if we would pay attention. We have inheritance set aside for us if we cooperate and participate correctly and flip that light switch, the lights will come on. The inheritance can be ours. But the reality of it is, if we just think, well, because we're born into who we are, that it's automatically going to happen. So it's showing us this in if we look at it correctly, right? The inheritance isn't passed just physical or natural selection. It's through God's choice. And God's choice is for those that follow him, that participate and cooperate with his system. In this same way, salvation isn't inherited, right? Our salvation isn't by our works. It's not because of what we've done. It's our faith alone is what saves. And let's pause for a second. I'm going to jump into Romans 10 real quick for one verse. Romans 10:13. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So again, we activate that light switch, turn on the lights. We activate that salvation. We activate that inheritance through our faith in believing in Jesus. And that's a key element that we need to understand. So we continue here with back to Romans 9:14. Are we saying then that God was unfair? Of course not. Here we go again. Point, counterpoint. Paul's answering his own questions. He's dialoguing to neutralize things. But he knows that that's something that people of wisdom or people of knowledge in the scriptures would potentially bring up, right? Well, you're just saying that God's unfair. He's willy-nilly choosing who gets what. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. So he disarms that argument right off the get-go. He's very knowledgeable, and he's leveraging his knowledge to help lead people down the right path. He's a very smart man in all of this, and I've always been impressed with Paul because of all that. He does this again in verse 19. So Romans 9:19. Well then, you might say, why does God blame people for not responding? Having they simply done what he makes them do? Then Paul uses this analogy of a potter using the same clay to make one jar for decoration and another to hold trash. The key here is that, again, it's Paul making connections, and sometimes to even the Old Testament. This is not to say that God created us as one thing or the other, i.e. a trash bucket or as a decoration. In the Old Testament, God sent Jeremiah, remember this, God sent Jeremiah to a potter's house to learn something. When the potter made a mistake and he marred that piece of clay, right, he remolded it and then he made it again. He corrected it. And God is always giving us that opportunity for that correction to be molded correctly, even in the last seconds of our life, if we'll participate. So this is from the Old Testament, Jeremiah 18:6. O Israel, can I not do to you as this potter has done to his clay? As the clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand. If we trust in him and we stay and cooperate with his system and his approach, we too can be remolded. No matter how, no matter if we were molded to hold trash, we can be molded to be a decoration. And no matter how marred or cracked or broken we can be molded whole. And it's just, we have to think about this, and this is throughout the Bible, which all these things connect. So Paul brings this full circle with his closing, Romans 9:24. And we are among those whom he selected, both from the Jews and the Gentiles. In other words, the door is wide open. The door is wide open for anyone and everyone. We have to choose to enter that chosen family. But that chosen family is set aside. It's there. That electricity is there. We have to flip the switch, and we choose through faith. Okay? So we'll wrap up today. We've got to get into Psalms 19. I love this psalm. It reminds me of so many beautiful sights, and I've been very blessed in my life and the opportunities to have done a lot of traveling, and not always traveling by choice. Many times the Army sends you where they want to send you for whatever reason. But in that, even in the most dire, desolate locations on the earth, there is profound beauty. And I've seen it in Colorado. I've seen it flying all over the world. I love Colorado sunsets, and most of my nieces and family know that, and I'll always post pictures of some of the beautiful Colorado sunsets. All of that, and looking at space is the same way, looking at the universe. It reminds me of the beauty that God has created everything, and he created it for us, right? So we start with verse 1. The heavens proclaim the glory of God, and I see that in all these beautiful sights. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound of word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. I mean, that just, to me, it just reeks of that... all the beauty that if we really slow down and look, we see. God reminds us so easily with every little thing that we see that he created it all for us, and the beauty of his creation. So let's close out with Proverbs. Proverbs 21, verse 18 I've got here. Let's see. Wine produces mockers. Alcohol leads to brawls. Those led astray by drink cannot be wise. Now, I will say something here. Don't let this be an excuse. And what I mean by that is, throughout the Bible, in the Old Testament, it talks about there is a time for joy, a time to be sad, a time for peace, a time to dance, time for war. There's a time for everything, a time to drink. The point is, this is not telling people not to drink. It's telling us to drink in moderation. It's telling our whole life should be in moderation and in preparation, walking lockstep with the Lord. Note it says, those led astray. To be led, somebody's following somebody. In other words, we're following the wrong lead. The Bible reminds us time and time again that our life is made up of choices. And we get that displayed throughout the Old Testament. All these examples of choices the kings have made and the consequences, the positives and the negatives. And so we can learn from that, right? We have to prepare ourselves to be able to deal with some of life's tougher choices. And moderation in what we drink and what we eat and everything is critical. We fast to learn self-control, and it's all about self-control. I always remind people, Jesus turned water into wine, right? He did that to continue the celebration because the celebration was in order with God's order. Now, if it was a drunken brawl, I guarantee you he wouldn't have done that. There's a big difference. It's working with God versus trying to do it in our own power and our own way because of that. And we should be using this same moderation in our eating, our drinking, our arguing, and our driving, right? Just saying. So perhaps I should just stop right there. Hopefully you got something out of this teaching today. Hop into the comments. Tell Elizabeth your thoughts, and everybody have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye-bye.